Allora, buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before starting this meeting, I would like to remember a person. Every time I met Father Francesco Venturino, known as Don Ciccio, he always asked me, "What about your friendship with Father Grégoire?" And I answered that every year I went to Africa, to the Ivory Coast or Benin or Burkina Faso, and recently Togo as well. Every year I spent time with Father Grégoire, and I found out more about his experience, of which we will talk about today. And his experience is now growing because not only is Father Grégoire here with us tonight, but also Ms. Simona Villa. I met her, and I will introduce her later, last December in Togo. How can we connect today's session with the title of the meeting? When I was preparing this introduction, I often ask myself how to do this. However, the meeting itself helped me. One of the last panels of the exhibition on Abraham says, since mystery started a fascinating adventure, that of becoming, of accompanying man so that man can find himself again, the method has always been the same. And what is this method? From Abraham on, we have seen this. To reach everyone and everything, God started by choosing one single person. So it is as if the mystery had to start again, to restart with each and every one of us. This method might sound absurd. In order to save the world, God called Abraham, who was a polytheist. He didn't know God. And so God started by creating a self, by giving awareness to a person, so that with Abraham we can really talk about the birth of the self. And that self comes alive in front of a presence who calls him and awakens that self from darkness. So, the experiences we will hear about today are very good examples of this method. There are men and women who were called to take action by God and to change history. This is what I always experience when I go to Africa. And every time I meet with my friends again, the title of today's session is Mental Illness and the Recovery of the Person, of the Self. This is something I experience every day because I'm a psychiatrist. And as Father Grégoire was saying, as he writes in the meeting magazine, in order to recover, medicine is not enough. Something else is needed for recovery. We need someone who keeps us company and whom we can trust. We have to know we can count on that person. I always say that we can go crazy if nothing is asked of us, if our wife, our child, our colleague does not ask anything from us any longer. And that is when we lose ourselves, so to speak. Existence always puts us through a very important moment, but reality, existence itself, is not enough. We also need an experience of faith. And I have started a path, a journey of faith with Father Grégoire, and I spent around maybe no more than half an hour with Simona there in Togo, but that was enough. That encounter was enough to understand that sometimes the terrible experiences we go through can redeem us, they can change us. So I will introduce them, but I will now show you a video first.
Questa è una storia dei giorni.
This is a modern story, but it starts in the past century, at the end of the 80s. A small worker discovered faith in God and started looking around himself, and so what eyes saw but couldn't see very well became more and more evident. And so this person asked himself what he could do to help build church. We are in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, and our journey starts in Benin, where Grégoire was a taxi driver. He was a very good person. Every day he went from Benin to Ivory Coast, to Burkina Faso, to Togo, to look for chained people and to give them a new life. These people are in chains because they're considered different. Their strange behavior lead other people to think that they're possessed by the devil, and so they might seem dangerous for other people. Traditional treatment is used, magic, wizards, but then these people are changed so that the devil cannot possess other people. After his pilgrimage in the Holy Land, Father Grégoire went back to those streets. He looked for those people in the cities where they were changed, and he created centers where those people could be welcomed, where they could get food, clothes, and help, and also medical treatment. But especially centers where they could work, because work gives men dignity. And so these people, who were the most forgotten people, to the most useful people of their towns. This is Madou, and the Swiss television has filmed his liberation. He had to eat his feces. And this is Madou, how we met him in the hospital of Mendo, where he works in the radiology department. He is a secretary. He welcomes people. And this is Janvier. I think no words are necessary to describe the way he was changed. Not even dogs are chained this way any longer. After spending 1 year in Grégoire's center, Janvier went back home, and now through berries they produce palm oil. These are many other people who were freed in 2013 by Grégoire and who were really born again, because otherwise they would have died in chains. When you are in chains, no one can free you any longer. However, Father Grégoire is going around small villages and talking with the leaders of the communities, explaining that if you love those people, they can go back home. And if we cure those people, they can learn how to take care of themselves. They can become useful. They can sew clothes, bake bread, which is an easy thing but a beautiful thing at the same time. All this is possible where Grégoire worked, and thanks to the help of a few people and thanks to God's providence, he managed to give a new life to hundreds of people. However, there are still places where there are terrible situations, and those situations have nothing to do with man's dignity, with the basic human rights. December 2014, Togo. The prophet is not far from the prayer center. He was very sad because there was this huge forest. There were only trees and people chained to those trees. Mental illness is seen as the possession of the devil. The devil has to be isolated, and so the mental patient has to be chained. The only thing that is done is praying for that person, but money is earned for those prayers, and those people will never manage to heal through prayer. Prayer just brings money. This is where the life of those people who are chained to trees ends. Father Grégoire cannot accept all this. He cannot allow that all this happens. And so this is the fundamental task now. The first stone has been set. Now a center has to be built in Togo to welcome all these people, to cure them, to give them a new life before giving them the dignity of being human. Thanks to all of you on behalf of Father Grégoire.
Ecco, quest'anno siamo ripartiti.
This year we started from Togo, from the experience of Togo, from what happened in December. We went to this prayer center, which is led by 7 Protestant priests. There were 204 people chained to trees, even children, and this was something we had never seen before. They were chained, their hands and feet were chained to trees. This was also something we had never seen, and we couldn't stand it. And that's why, when faced with that terrible situation, we never stopped hoping, we never lost hope. And that was when I met Sister Simona. She was with another sister there. She was working in Togo. And I immediately liked her for her livelihood, for her happiness, which is not easy to find in a difficult situation. When you're in a difficult situation and you find such a strong and happy person, you can find hope again. And you start wondering how one can be strong in such a context. And so, to go back to the title of the meeting, how can we fill our hearts? How can we fill that lack we feel? Well, this is a very interesting question. So I now give the floor to Sister Simona, who will show us some photos. And this is the first time she speaks in front of an audience, so let's give her a round of applause.
Grazie Marco, grazie dell'incoraggiamento.
Thank you Marco. Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, I want to thank the organizers of this meeting, those people who invited us and gave us the possibility to tell you our experience. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really glad that Grégoire is here as well. I'm really happy that he's here, and I'm really lucky to have met him. I know that God wanted me and my community to meet him, and I know that the Lord is guiding us in order to work together and to show to other people his love. So I will introduce myself very briefly. I am Sister Simona. I belong to the Sisters of Mercy congregation, and I am a surgeon. I've been living in Togo for 7 years, and I'm there with my community in a missionary hospital of the Fate Bene Fratelli, and we work in surgery and in the OR. We not only work in the hospital, but also in the villages around our hospital, which is located in Ahongbonon. We usually go around villages in order to meet very poor people who are in need, and we usually provide consultations for children, and we provide medicines even in the most remote villages. We met many children who are in need, and we also opened a welcoming center for these children. Right now 17 children are in this center. You might wonder, but and what about the mentally ill patients? Actually, I understood that the Lord can connect things even though things apparently are not connected between them. As I said, I'm a surgeon, and I really don't like psychiatric. And I've never known how to relate to mentally ill patients. However, I'm discovering that the Lord can totally change us, and the mission that He gives us can change us as well. So, what happened? Well, I met Grégoire. Obviously, somebody wanted us to meet. The Lord wanted us to meet, and I met him thanks to a priest who had known him, had known his work. He had talked to me about him, and he had gave me a booklet which talked about him and about what he does with mentally ill patients. When I read this book, I was really impressed, and I couldn't sleep easy anymore. I've started feeling something inside me, and I really wanted to build something with him. And from that time, I started to realize something. As Grégoire said, he didn't really see mentally ill patients before, and at a certain time, he started to do something for them. Well, I became aware, and the same happened to me. I've started to become aware of some situations of mentally ill patients that I was meeting, and they were asking for help. So I've met Grégoire, and he helped me. I was bringing to him some of my mentally ill patients, and a premise. He has his welcoming center in Togo. I'm sorry, he is in Benin while we are in Togo. So we were forced to bring our mentally ill patients there. And obviously it was really difficult, especially for medicines. So we started asking Grégoire if he could come to us to open a new center in our diocese. And Grégoire started talking and telling us about his story, and it really changed us, it really transformed us. The prayer centers are centers in which the mentally ill patients are welcomed, and they are tied to trees with chains under the sun, the rain, maybe they are naked, because people there think that the mental illness is due to the devil presence. So they're not provided with medicines, and they live in very difficult conditions. For example, those people maybe don't eat, or sometimes they are beaten. And Grégoire had told us that there were many of these centers in Togo, so we started to go around and we found many of those centers, and the most incredible one was the one of which Marco was talking before, a center in which there were more than 200 people chained. And among them, there also were children who had epilepsy. And I swear to you that this is something that I cannot forget anymore, because becoming aware of that reality really impressed me and transformed me. Every night I am reminded of those people, and I know that I have to do something for those people who are close to us, and I thank God for making me aware of this situation, because this is what allows me to fight and to believe that there is a hope for a change. When I was invited to the meeting and I read the theme, the topic of our meeting, thinking about the recovery of the person, I thought that in this reality full of mentally ill people who are not considered people anymore because they are chained, I think that in this reality, it is important to be aware that in front of us there are people. So even though people are ill or maybe violent, they are different from what I am. However, they still are people. And if we Catholics do and think in this way, well, it's like if we're swearing, because everybody belongs to the same Father. Every person is our brother, because they are sons of the same Father. So I think that I'm like obliged to do something for that people. Maybe the recovery of the self of the person is not simple to do, because firstly it means to love the other person, to love being aware that he is ill. And the better treatment for an ill person is love, and then of course medicines. And the third fundamental thing is to give back to this person a new place, a new role in the society. And this is what happens in the centers of Grégoire and of the Saint Camille. When those ill people feel better, they are like reintegrated in society. They are able to learn a new kind of job, and they maybe can also create a family. So, according to me, this is the real recovery of the person of which our title talks about. I would like to add something. We've been talking about a reality that maybe for the majority of you seems very distant. However, I don't want you to think that this reality exists in Togo because people of Togo are evil and they want to chain and to tie their brothers. There are many features of that society that we have to know in order to judge the situation, because Togo is a very poor country, and I can assure you that this poverty is a very significant factor, a significant feature, because when somebody is ill in those countries, in order to be treated, needs money. So everybody has to pay all the treatments. I'm a surgeon, and if I have to treat a person who has peritonitis, that person has to buy everything, the gauze, the betadine, all the medical equipment, otherwise he won't be operated. Even though the illness is serious. For example, in our hospital, we treat urgent cases even though the person cannot afford it. However, this doesn't happen in all hospitals. So the economic aspect is very significant. There are mentally ill patients who need long-term medicines and chronic medicines, and who can afford them. For example, in our diocese, we have a psychiatric hospital, the only one in Togo. And however, the conditions in which live those patients are similar to the centers of prayers of which we were talking about. And sometimes the medicines that they give to patients stun them. So this is not a really good treatment. Plus, in this hospital, in order to be hospitalized, you need to pay a great amount of money, and nobody can afford this sum of money. So there is no other alternative. And if in the family there is a mentally ill person, the only alternative is to bring that person to a center of prayer. And at least in that center, the patient is chained, he's tied, so at least he's calmer. And obviously it costs less because they don't have to buy medicines. So it seems a very shocking reality, but we need to be aware of what's happening there in that society. We do believe that we have to provide an alternative to all of these. Obviously, when we take away those patients from the centers of prayers, what do we do with them if we don't have an appropriate alternative? I do believe that Grégoire is the alternative, and all the work that he's doing. I think that you have seen on the screen the pictures of the chained patients. And what we're doing right now, Grégoire and I, is creating a centers in our diocese so that those patients can be welcomed there in order to treat them. In the centers of Grégoire, the patients are treated and then they learn a job. And usually when they are treated, patients help other patients to do new jobs. So this is the alternative, what we're doing right now. This is what started in our diocese, close to Afagnan. We started building a center in order to welcome those patients. I think that what's happening there is really close to, it involves me and my congregation. And I need to thank my congregation because it was aware that the Lord is calling us to do something there. I am a sister of mercy and I am called to testimony mercy. Well, I've learned more what mercy is thanks to Grégoire. Mercy is the possibility to love other people, especially the weakest people of society. We've started building this center, and this is the first stone, which was built on the February 2nd, 2015. Obviously, it will take time because we also need a lot of money to build it. But as Grégoire teaches me, we believe that God's providence will help us. And we believe that we are instruments in the hands of God. So I really want to thank Grégoire of his presence, and because he allowed us to discover this reality, I know that the Lord is guiding us throughout all the work that we're doing. And may God help us. I hope the Lord will help us in order to create this new center, this new building, so that we can help those people to recover their dignity. And we can do this through our medicines and through the love that we can give them and through their reintegration in the society, so that they can have a family, they can have a new role, and so that they know that they are loved and that they have a place in the world. Thank you so much.
Prima di dare la parola a Grégoire,
Before giving the floor to Father Grégoire, I would like to go back to the fact that Sister Simona started becoming interested in psychiatry, and she would like me to start investigating surgery. I don't think I will ever make it. Anyway, we met the congregation of the Sister of Mercy when we went to Lombardy, and we met the center of the Holy of Saint Luigi Taramoni. I went to Monza many times in that center. I think the Superior General is here. The Mother Superior is probably here, so let's give her a round of applause as well. And another connection between me and the congregation of the Sisters of Mercy is that they were the sisters who supported Eruana Englaro while she was still alive. I am very moved by this fact. As I was saying before, I've been working with Father Grégoire for around 20 years. And it is quite impressive that the mystery, in order to change the world, chooses Abraham. In order to change the world, it chose a self. However, this method is crazy, or maybe it is the most realistic method, more than all our ideas and theories. We know what came out of the choice of Abraham. What comes out of our projects? Saying yes to the one who's calling upon us is maybe the greatest contribution we can give to the world. When I went to Africa, I became aware of how extraordinary the experience of Father Grégoire is. The thing that impresses me the most is that he is able to look around himself, but he's also able to look at the world through the eyes of faith. We will see that video again without audio, and it will show us that we see reality, but we are not really aware of it. And Father Grégoire at some point started becoming aware of that reality, and thanks to faith he was able to see what was around him, and he was able to take action to bring change into that reality. What he's doing is also a new kind of culture. Sister Simona wanted to create a new center in Togo because those centers are an alternative to those prayer centers where people are chained. In those centers run by Father Grégoire, people are treated. And this has brought a change in society because now people are starting to bring the mentally ill patients not to those prayer centers where they are chained or naked, but to the centers run by Father Grégoire, where they are treated and helped. I now give the floor to Father Grégoire. He's not as shy as Sister Simona, and I would like to give him a round of applause and to thank him for being here.
Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening to all of you. I'm sorry, this is the only thing that I can say in Italian. I am very happy to be here this evening and to be able to tell you about my experience, the experience we are going through in Africa today. This is not only my experience, this is not only my project, it is God's project. God who's looking for the person he wants, wherever he wants to find that person. God looked for me 30 years ago when I still repaired tires. And then I went to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage. During a pilgrimage, that pilgrimage I was with a priest. He paid for me to go to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage. That priest used to say that every Christian person has to participate, to take part in the project of the church by doing his bit. Church is not only made through priests, through religious people, but also through every one of us. So I asked myself, what can I do? And this is the question I asked myself when I went back to work in Ivory Coast in Africa. I started sharing with my wife something I truly believed in. So I decided to create a community of prayer. And then we went to a general hospital to meet with the patients and pray with them. During our prayer sessions, we saw that there were patients who were abandoned to themselves. They had no treatment. Because in Africa, there is no healthcare system, no social security. If you don't have money, you cannot have treatment. And so some patients were completely left to themselves. And so we started telling ourselves, maybe before praying, we have to show them our love, our friendship. Only in this way can we do something for them. So we started washing them, and we started looking for money to treat them. Then many patients started healing, and those who had to die had a decent death. And in that moment, I finally understood why God identified himself with the poor and with the ill. And that's why We have to look for God in poor people. And this is the only way in which we can do something. Then we started visiting prisons. In the 90s, we also started working with mentally ill patients. I saw mentally ill patients everywhere. However, it was as if they did not exist. One day, while I was walking in Wake, I saw a mentally ill patient. He was completely naked and he was looking for food among the rubbish. And so on that day, I stopped for the first time and I started seeing that person with different eyes, because I understood that in that person there was God, that I was meeting God, I was meeting Jesus, who was made flesh and became that ill person. And so every evening I went around the city to look for those patients. I understood that those people were men and women, children who wanted to be loved. And then I talked about this with my wife. Every evening my wife prepared something to eat, and we went around the city with a small refrigerator, something to eat and drink, to give those people something to drink and a small meal. And so I asked myself, why are we just giving them food and water on the streets, and then, however, we're going back to our homes? This is not enough. We had to do something more. And so I started visiting patients in the general hospital, and there was a small bar which was no longer used, and so we asked the director of the hospital to turn that abandoned place into the hospital chapel, and we brought the first patients there. We treated them as people. Of course, we used medical treatment, and we saw the first results. And so these results were very impressive. In 1993, the Minister for Health came to visit us in that hospital. The director invited him. We told him about our experience, and the minister was so happy that he encouraged us to spread this experience in all hospitals of the country, because the minister said that they did not know what to do. Our example was very interesting for him, and so we asked him to provide a bigger place in the hospital where we could work. And that's how the first center was created. It was almost a miracle, because there were mentally ill patients in a hospital where there are other kinds of patients, and this is not something common. Thanks to God's help, we managed to create this center. We brought the mentally ill patients who we saw on the street to that hospital. Then families started to ask for our help, and in 1994, a woman came to visit us, and she told me, please help me. One of my relatives is sick. So I went with her to her village to take care of his father. His father was dirty. He was seriously ill. I took this person, I went to the leader of the village, and I made him understand that I had to do something for this person. I saw things in that village that I would never have imagined. There were people who were trying to stop me. They did not want to let me through. There were people who were completely chained to trees. There were feces all around them. We did not know what to do. On Sunday, where there are the traditional celebrations, we went back to that village with a nun, with a sister. It was hard to take care of those patients. However, we washed them and we brought them to our center. After they had been washed, they looked at us and they told us, I don't know how to thank you. I don't know what I did to deserve this treatment. Those people asked me, will I finally be cured? And as you can say, those people had the desire to live to the fullest. However, some of those people were so dirty that they died. Those people wanted to be treated as people. They wanted to start a new life. People are chained in many different ways. Sometimes their hands are tied to trees, sometimes their neck or their feet. But when I go to a village and I saw a patient who's chained to a tree, I tell myself, it is not the family's fault, because those families do not know what to do. In those villages, the mentally ill patients are forgotten. In Ivory Coast, there are more than 120 million inhabitants. And this country is slightly bigger than Italy. In Benin, which is the country where I come from, there's only one hospital. There is no money to cure patients. And so families do not know what to do with those mentally ill patients. And this is what hurts us, because those people are chained in those prayer centers who use God's name to mistreat other people. We're talking about real sects. They are chaining people to make the body suffer so that the devil can leave their body. So they are beaten, they are hit, they spend days and nights without food nor water. We showed these images to some policymakers, but there was no result. And then we also went to the court to talk about the situation. We also called police. However, people told us, those people are crazy, what can we do? And as you can understand, when a person is crazy, that person is considered without rights. And so the only thing we could do was creating more centers. Now there are 4 centers where people are welcomed and 6 centers where people learn new jobs. We went to Benin in 2004, thanks to the bishop. We now have 3 welcoming centers and 1 center is being built. There are other 3 centers where people learn new jobs. And all the people who are in our centers can be treated because we have the necessary medical treatment we can provide those people with. And what is my message? The message I would like to convey tonight. What we're doing is not something which starts from me, from us. It starts from God, because God looks for the person, the people he needs. I was just a man who repaired tires. And it was God who looked for me, and God wanted me to take care of these people. So I would like to thank God who managed to touch the heart of our community, and I would really like to thank God for choosing me. What we found out about in Togo is something terrible. I saw prayer centers, many of those centers, and that was the first time when I saw 204 chained people in a single center. There were 9-year-old epileptic children, and for that they are chained to trees because other people think they are possessed by the devil. We are not different from mentally ill patients. It is easier to live with mentally ill people than living with other kinds of people. It is easier to share our lives with mentally ill people than living with normal people. Because mentally ill patients are people just like us who love us and love each other. All centers welcome patients, and when these people are healed, they help nurses. They even become the directors of those centers. They work in those centers. They become members of staff. And so what does this tell us? That we have to trust those people. We have to love them. We must never stop to give them tasks and responsibilities. I have experienced this in my daily life. For example, there is a mentally ill girl. She had meningitis. She was sent to the hospital. And this is an example of God's work. God helps ill people. This young woman had a child. And then there was another woman who came to the hospital. She came and visited this young woman at the hospital. She saw that she wasn't calm and that she was sick. And so she said, we have to take this young woman to a center which has just been opened. I'm sure the people of the center can help her. And so her mom took that girl to our center. When I had gone to Benin because on that day the food center had been open. Marco also had to come, but then he didn't manage to. And so this woman brought the ill girl to that center, and I said, there's nothing we can do. However, the priest told me, yes, there is something we can do. And so I went to the center. I saw this ill girl, and the priest told me, this woman has just come out of the hospital. I know when people leave hospitals, they will never manage to go back again. So we brought her to our center, and after 3 days, Pascaline, this young woman, woke up. She started speaking again, and we also started to understand what her condition was. We managed to improve her situation. She was healed, and then her mom said, well, she has to start studying again. So this woman had died, and then she had been reborn. And that's why I told that young girl that she had to start studying again. I know some people stop studying once they go back home, but that was not the case for Pascaline, because thanks to the help of God, she managed to study. She took her A levels, she passed all her exams. When I asked her what she wanted to do, she said, I want to help my brothers. And so I told her, okay, so we will send you to Burkina Faso to the school for nurses. And so she went there, and now she trains the nurses who work for our centers. So she took her life into her own hands. Her life changed completely. She was the director of a center. She took care of patients. And now she has become responsible for all centers of the country. So everyone is important for God. We are all the same for God. as Marco was saying, the story of Abraham is something we experience every day. For example, when we built the first center in Benin, there were already 4 centers in the country near there, and so we said, okay, let's stop building centers. Let's take care of those patients. That was back in 2004. In 2005, I went to the Ivory Coast, and I felt that I had to go to the north. I didn't know Benin very well, but that voice inside me was so loud that when I got home, I told my wife, I have to go to the north. Someone is telling me that I have to go. And so I said bye to her. I took my car. I got to the first town, which was more than 450 kilometers far from my home. I met with the priest of a parish there. We started a dialogue and we created an association which takes care of mentally ill patients. When I met that priest for the first time, I told him, we have an association of mentally ill patients. And he asked me, do you mean crazy people? And I said, yes. He wasn't very interested. And so I took my car. I drove for another 450 kilometers again. I went to one of the towns at the border and I started looking around me. And then I saw a street sign which said Targeta. Tangeta. Tangeta is an area where I know a doctor was working, Dr. Floran. I stopped and asked for the right direction to get to Tangata. I drove for another 60 kilometers and I finally got there. And there I met with the secretary of Dr. Floran. He had left that morning, however, he wasn't there. And so I started crying in front of that woman. I said, I drove all this way for nothing. She asked me where I came from. I said, I came all the way here to meet with a doctor. And so she told me to knock on the door. I was told to get in, so I entered the room. And that person asked me, the person who was in the room asked me, are you Father Grégoire? And I said, yes. And that person told me, I know you because I've heard about you. Why did you come here? I started talking to him and he was aware that God had sent me. And then he called the bishop, and as soon as the bishop heard my name, he said, yes, I want to meet him. So the bishop also came. We sat down. The bishop looked at me and at the doctor and started laughing. He was laughing all the time, and so I asked myself, why is he laughing? And at the end, the doctor said, what's happening, Mr. Bishop? And the bishop said, you cannot imagine what I am thinking about in this moment because God is a true mystery. And he started telling us his story. 3 months ago, some sisters came to me. They said that they wanted to do something about the many mentally ill patients in the area. They wanted to open a center in the Diocese of Port Nouveau. After some days, another group of sisters came back because they also wanted to do something and to cooperate with us. And so I went to Port Nouveau as well. I met with the bishop of Port Nouveau, and as soon as I said that my name was Grégoire Saint-Camille, the bishop started telling me about the miracles God performs. And everything that the bishop was telling me made me think, about many aspects. And so in the end, the bishop called me. I found him. He did not have to look for Grégoire because God sent me to him. And this is God's mercy. And this proves that this project is not my project. It is the project of God who looks for the people he needs. In 1998, for the first time, I came here to tell my story. And since 1998, I'm looking for men and women who can help me put God's providence into practice. The men and women who work with me pray every single day so that we can finally break those chains in Africa. Those men and women give us and show us God's providence. They help us pay for medicines. And so, thank you. Thank you very much for your help. This story is the story of each and every one of us. No one talks about mentally ill patients. There are wars everywhere in Lebanon, in Syria. We have listened people talking about those wars as well here at the meeting. But no one talks about mentally ill patients. There are thousands of mentally ill patients who are still in chains. When you leave this room, you will remember about the pictures you've seen here. And these pictures represent you, because you and every one of us is in chains. When we saw people chained to trees, we are actually faced with ourselves. It is the picture of all men and women of the world. When I saw a man or a woman chained to a tree, when I saw a woman chained to a tree, I am seeing my mother and every single woman of the world. Mental illness is perceived as a shame for families in Africa, but it should be perceived as a shame for all mankind. And until there will be a man or a woman chained to a tree, the whole mankind, the whole humankind will be chained to a tree. When you leave this room, I hope that you will become witnesses of this story. Jesus Christ will not descend upon us. We have to make this story our story. And to conclude, I would like to say that the people who have been helping the missions in Africa since 1998, who are here or in Italy, I would like to tell them that I'm really thankful. Many priests, many communities supported me in my work. So thank you very much. This is a very heartfelt thank. However, always remember that God is the one who will thank you in the end. Thank you to the community, to the congregation of mercy, of the Sisters of Mercy. But God in the end will thank us and will thank you, Marco, and all your family. One day God will tell you, come, you who have been blessed by the Father, receive the kingdom I prepared for you since the creation of the world. Because I'm hungry and you fed me. I'm thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was naked and you gave me clothes. I was a foreigner and you welcomed me among you. I was ill. I was imprisoned. And I would say I was also chained and abandoned, and you took care of me. Thank you. Thanks to every one of you.
Allora ci siamo.
So God has called Abraham. However, God chooses people nowadays as well. I am a psychiatrist, and sometimes I cure people who hear voices, but God is a real presence who fascinates you and who calls you for a mission. I want to thank Sister Simona, and I will give her a round of applause. And obviously, I'm very thankful to Grégoire. I'm not very good at theology, but in this meeting, I have better understood that God makes an alliance with man. I thought God fell asleep sometimes, but I realized that there are people who are awakened by the call of God. Well, what I've learned is that God keeps on calling men and women, such as Sister Simona and Grégoire. And we need to follow these people. This is our task and responsibility. Thank you and good afternoon.